Hey, welcome back everybody. I'm here again with another video, this time with some more Malifaux. I've picked up the Orderlies, originally from the 2nd edition starter box. These are now a part of the One Flew Over box with Dr. Grimwell and Nurse Heartsbane. Decided to paint these two up because I want to practice painting medical jackets and gloves and things, so I thought these would be fun. They've obviously got a lot of needles about them, one actively hiding one, the other one kind of flaunting a bunch along his front, and we'll be going for kind of a grim medical feel for these. So we'll be using some of the bases that we created in a previous video and be using some lighter pastel colors overall to kind of set the theme and mood. So we're going to be using this gray blue, pale green, and white ink predominantly to get the main colors that we need. We'll see those in just a bit. So the first thing that we're going to do after priming these black, using Stynylrez black primer, I'm going to use our Winsor & Newton white ink to go over these with a zenithal style pre-shade. Now sometimes you don't necessarily want to go top down. In this case I want that overhead fluorescent lighting look, so it's going to be a very direct top down kind of shading. Definitely take your time when you're doing this. Gonna make sure everything looks correct. If something isn't quite falling in the right spot, you don't have to necessarily follow the direction of the paint. You can always put a little bit more ink where you need it. And since I am using ink, this is a little bit different than acrylic paint. It does take longer to cure, and sometimes it can reactivate a little bit, which we will actually see later on in the video. Had a little bit of a flub later on, but this pre-shade came out pretty nice, pretty solid. I like where this is going. And once I'm done with this one, we'll just rush through the second one in the same manner, but we'll shorten up the video for you. Probably starting right about now. Alright, I've went ahead and added a bit of gray blue over the entire model, and now I'm going back in with pale green very subtly over the pants on this guy and the gloves and boot coverings on the other. So the pale gray blue is over the coat in general, and we're hitting a couple of spots here with the pale green before moving on. Notice I'm using just a piece of parchment paper to block off some of the model, to make sure I don't get any overspray on that green here on the gloves. Now that we've got the gray blue down and the pale green, we're going to move on to some detail work now. So some of the things that we're looking at here, one of the first is the apron on one of our orderlies. I want this to look like just kind of a rawhide / leather style apron. So we're going to start off by using some scale 75 orange leather to base coat in the entire thing. Next up, let's go ahead and work on the flesh tones for these two. I'm going to start off with a layer of Braineater Azure, and I'm going to mix in a little bit of Harvester Flesh for the mid-tone, and then continue mixing up to a Moonray Flesh. So this is a partially blended tones, partially feathering. We pick out the high points. There's not too much actual flesh on them. They're both wearing what appears to be goggles and face masks, so we're going to have to color those in as well, but they do have a couple of exposed bits around the face, and this one on the hands. Another nice thing about the Moonray Flesh is it makes a great highlight tone for the rest of the clothing. So the greens, the blues, and the whites, we're going for white sneakers on this guy, all highlight out pretty well with Moonray Flesh, and we'll be using blues to actually shade them down. So you'll notice I'm reusing some of the same flesh tones, and this kind of unifies the overall look of the model. Now you'll notice I've gotten a little bit of tearing over some of the places where I've used a little bit of ink and airbrush paint. That's because of some reactivation on the inks part. It's a little bit hydrophilic. So we will have to correct that. Now some spots might look a little messy at the end, a little bit rough, but we'll do our best. I'm going to reuse some of the higher tones, a little bit of white, and a little bit of that Moonray Flesh to get the highlight bits on the syringes here. And then we'll use a little bit of Army Painter Black at the end to make them look like somewhat empty vials, or at least mysterious looking vials. We're going to use a little bit of burnt sienna to get the leather straps for the goggles, a little bit of black on the lenses, and we're using that pale green again on the front of the face mask with a little bit of the Moonray Flesh for highlights. So this is a batch of 2. All of the things that we've been doing to the first orderly we're also carrying across to the second orderly, so we're going to have to get his skin, his face mask, and all of the little bits and bobs here. Keeping it simple on the lenses for the goggles, we're doing a simple black lens with a very small specular highlight of white, just to make them pop out a little bit. We've washed the leather down with some Agrax Earthshade from Citadel as well. This is one of my favorite things to do with leather. I like starting off with orange leather and using Citadel's Druchii Violet to wash it all down to get this nice weathered kind of deep rich tone all across the orange leather. It works well at a color level, works well at a shade level, and once we're done with that we'll come in and re-highlight it. Just getting this undershirt here real quick with a little bit of that pale blue from before. And then we're going to have to just wait on this part and get back to him in a little bit. We'll also get his hair. We started off with some of that burnt sienna, and I'm going to use that same Agrax Earthshade mix that we used before on the goggles to get the hair. After all those shades are dry, I'm just going to slowly work back up over the leather using a bit of orange leather once again, back up to that base tone. Just kind of hitting the areas where the leather is going to be touched and abrased by various work and weather, and just kind of leaving the recesses shaded down and that rich kind of purple shadow. The very worn areas, like the edges and kind of the very raised areas, we're going to hit with a little bit of Averland Sunset mixed in with that orange leather for a high tone. You can actually add scratches and wear and tear and kind of rawhide edges as well with that Averland Sunset and orange mix, so get crazy. I use a little bit of white, and then I go back over it with thin layer of Screamer Pink, and then highlight again on the white to get the syringes themselves, you know, the non-needle parts, looking like they've got a little bit of fluid along its front bell. The hair is now a blend of burnt sienna and Averland sunset, and a little bit of the high skin tone, Moonray Flesh, just various colors we still have on the palette that we can mix together and still fit the rest of the scheme of the mini, kind of keeping the palette tight. Also, why not just use the paint that we have out on the wet palette, right? Just a little bit of Moonray Flesh and white over the boots to get the high tones, and in the low tones we use a little bit of Reaper Blue Liner to get some shade, and we can actually use this in the blues on the shirt as well, just to get some recess shading. So I'm getting that along the gloves really deeply and in the boots to really emphasize the wrinkles and creases here. And for a quick paint job for 2 minis, I think we're looking like we're about done. We just need to drop a quick pin in the bases and through their feet. We'll be finished. As mentioned, we had some bases from a previous video that we wanted to use, and here they are with our 2 orderlies that I've lovingly named Stabs and Jabs. They're ready to go. Now, hopefully one day I'll actually play some Malifaux, but these 2 are ready for when the day comes, and I'll have to let you know how I enjoy the game. In the meantime, we'll be back again next week with another painting video, and have fun painting.
A strange day.